Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, viewers. I'm Matthias Aufiku, news editor of the Namibian Sun newspaper. Welcome to another exciting edition of the Evening Review Show. Before we get into the business of the day, let's first have a look at today's headlines. Well, we're joined in studio tonight by my colleague, Toivon Jebela, the editor of the paper. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for having me, Matthias.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's good to have you here today.
Yeah, especially on the opposite side of the of the setup. You know?
Yeah, very good, very good.
Yeah.
There are interesting developments taking place in Parliament.
Yeah.
The deliberations on the way forward for the Anti-Corruption Commission, who's going to head the commission. What's your take?
Yeah, so, Matthias, I have, I think, two fundamental issues with the manner in which this whole process is being held. First is the way the law is set up. That the head of state actually nominates, if my understanding is correct, the candidates for the position of Director General of the ACC and the deputy.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the fact that the two candidates are the incumbents who have been in this position since 2006, from the inauguration of the ACC. So, the first point is really that I personally do not believe that the president of a country who's heading an administration that is generally and inevitably prone to being embroiled in allegations of corruption should be appointing or making nominations for ACC Director and Deputy Director General and Deputy Director General, because I mean, I am thinking that this is a process that should solely be a responsibility of Parliament. You get nominated. I actually believe that the position must be advertised and might be a body set up by Parliament, conduct the shortlisting, and then Parliament itself conducts the final process of appointment and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because at what point, as an appointee or as a nominee of the president, do you actually go after him, especially or his close associates, when they get embroiled in allegations of corruption, for example? It's the same principle that I hold against the nomination of ECN, the Electoral Commission, the election commissioners of the ECN, also being appointed by the president, who has a direct interest in the electoral outcomes.
Yeah.
So I have those fundamental problems from the legal point of view. But from the other side of my discontent is really the fact that what is it that the Director General, the current Director General and his deputy have done so well to warrant nomination for an extension again, after having been at the helm of the ECN for more than 15 years? So what is it that they have done so well that is on record, that we know? What are their record of success that warrants that? So those are the questions that I'm pondering as far as this matter is concerned. Yeah.
In terms of the parliamentary process, there has always been talks that the executive seems to always dictate to Parliament what to do. Do you think this also perhaps raises concern among the public?
It does, because I actually believe that that's also another big question, you know, the separation of power question. when the executive makes this nomination, takes it to the legislature, which must then, and the way it is in Namibia right now, with the legislature being so dominated by members of the party to which the president who made the nomination belong, then it becomes like a what? It's a funny exercise. It's like a formality. Just let's take it there. Let's make it look a legitimate process because the law says it anyways, and then let's see it through. Yeah. From the separation of power point of view, also I have an issue with that. Yeah. But also the fact that the ACC office itself resorts under the presidency, that is problematic for me. Yeah.
Yeah. But just to bring it back a bit, let's say for instance the SWAPO party didn't wield that much dominance in parliament, or the president was not from the ruling party, would it still be an issue? The arrangement, the process that takes place to appoint the DG.
Yeah. So Matthias, please hear me out. It's not even about SWAPO or Hage Geingob himself as a president. For me, it's a principle. I don't care who's the president at that point in time. I don't care who's the ruling party in that point in time. The president, the ACC is there to investigate mostly public abuse of public office, corruption, as it relates to public office, the public space, essentially. Now, if the president, whoever it is, if it was Job Mpanda today as president, or is it Itula or Mark Henry Venani, appoints the Director General of the ACC and the deputy, and is presiding over an administration that the ACC must constantly scrutinize, that for me is problematic. Yeah. Because you just feel, okay, if we uncover too much corruption, my appointing authority might, we might be upsetting my appointing authority because he will be perceived to be presiding over a very corrupt regime and stuff like that. That loyalty is very, very dangerous. And Paulus Noah and Erna van der Merwe are human beings. They have families to feed. They wouldn't want to step on every toe. And that for me is a very problematic arrangement. Even if, as a matter of fact, even if you remove the two of them and put others, but through the same process, that would have still been very problematic.
In one of the local papers today, the ombudsman, the outgoing ombudsman, Mr. John Walters, he raises the issue that the position of the ombudsman and PG, those positions are advertised. Maybe this one should also be the same. Do you agree with him?
Precisely. I mean, what is the difference? What is the difference between the ombudsman, PG, and ACC Director General in the broader scheme of things? The PG is there to, let me start with ombudsman, for example. The ombudsman is actually there to scrutinize human rights, sometimes violations by the state. So his job essentially sets him up against the state, just the way the job itself is set up. The ACC, the same logic there. So what is it that, because SWAPO is also very uncanny. The way these comrades have set up themselves up when the whole idea of ACC started being contemplated, they set it up in such a way, even by law, in such a way that it sort of turns its attention away from those that it should actually be scrutinizing. So that's how they set up that office. And for me, it must have been a very deliberate decision at the time. And they are now reaping the fruit of that. I mean, look at the Kora Music Award scandal that is currently in the court. Whether it's true or not is not the question, but Ernest Ajovi has extensively mentioned the president in that thing, that he had everything, or he played a very critical role in that whole thing. Of course, the president has denied it. But imagine if that was the ACC case. As a matter of fact, the ACC has tried to stay away from that case. They're not involved at all. The questions have been put to them. Why is ACC not investigating one of the biggest corruption scandals in the country, which is Cora Awards? And the ACC has always said, no, it's not our case. Nobody has brought a complaint to us and stuff like that. You can already see how strategically they are trying to keep their hands off, because your appointing authority, the appointing authority of Mr. Paulus Noah, is implicated, at least by, or has been implicated by this Ajawi character in that thing. So you can only see how problematic that whole process is. But despite the public outcry
against the extension or the reappointment of Mr. Noah and his deputy, are there really sound performance assessment tools that should inform the decision as to whether to reappoint or not to reappoint?
Because that is the question that we must actually be putting to the president, to say, when you are nominating Paulus Noah and Erna van der Merwe to become or to get another 5-year term of office, what measurement have you used to sort of assess what they've done? And that was my first point also, to say, what is it that they have done that separates them from the pack, and say, look, these two have really been performing. What is it that we know today, even in terms of successful prosecutions? Of course, Noah has always said, no, prosecution is a duty now of, we investigate and then we hand over everything to the PG, and the PG must take over from there. But if you do not give the PG enough evidence, or evidence enough to get someone convicted, then obviously we'll come back to the ACC and say, what is it that you've given? Because the ACC gets, the PG gets so many people convicted all the time in other cases. But for ACC cases, the rate of conviction is shocking, especially for really the so-called bigger fish. If it's secretaries who have stolen stationery at their schools and whatnot, there's been a lot of convictions. But the people who have been robbing our country of its livelihood through the theft of public resources that were meant for all of us and whatnot, there hasn't been really any successful conviction that is worth talking. There's been very few that you can talk about.
One of the most contentious issues is also the issue of the terms. Should there be term limits? Should there not be term limits? What is your thinking around this?
There has to be terms.
Because it's already 15 years. It's going to, so by the time they're done, they would probably have served more than 21 years or so.
Exactly. So again, terms for an important office like that are very important. The president of the country serves for a particular period of time because he sits in that very powerful position. ACC, if you do not limit the terms, people also became complacent. But the way terms work is also this. If you see in the case of the ombudsman, and he denied it, but we saw only the energy once it was confirmed that he was on his way out. But every time when there was a possibility to renew his contract, we never saw him taking on government, because again, you feel pity for him, because it's one thing to be strong and doing your job properly, but sometimes in this country, the way our country is set up is that if you do your work honestly and with the vigor and energy that is required, you end up actually losing your job, because doing your job properly means taking on these big officials who are in charge, and then they'll give you problems. So I think ACC must have term limits. I think that is what you wanted to say. So term limits, to say you only serve up to, maybe 5 years, renewable for another 5 years. After that, there can never be renewal.
But if there's so much opposition towards the possible extension of Mr. Noah's contract, and you've mentioned earlier on that what tools are used to measure his performance. So what tools does the public use to measure Mr. Noah's performance to say that he must go?
I think, look, it's obvious, Matthias. The public is so huge that it has all its eyes on the Director General and his deputy. just like they have their eyes on someone else. There isn't anything in the public domain, as far as I'm concerned, and I could be wrong, that really is convincing the public to want these terms to be extended. The only reason in my own case that I can think of, the only one reason that I can think of why these two directors must have their terms extended is really Fish Road, where I'm thinking to disrupt the biggest investigation ever presided over by the ACC by appointing someone new and having to start, because institutional memory is also very important in this particular case, to say this is where we started, these are the processes that were involved, this is where we are now, and this is where we want to be. That is perhaps the only reason I can think of. But if that is the reason, then why don't you give them three years, for example, and say, look, we'll give you 3 years to oversee, to see through this whole case, and then after a ruling and judgment has been made in this case, we hope within 3 years ahead this would have been completed, and then you can leave. But I can't think of any other reason why they have their cases, their terms extended. I can't think of that.
Yeah. With the matter currently being in Parliament, thinking of the current political climate in Parliament, how do you see these deliberations turning out?
Yeah, so the way I see it is opposition would obviously be challenging the reappointment, but they are in the minority overall.
Yeah.
And therefore they cannot win against SWAPO. SWAPO has a slender lead over the opposition in terms of the numbers.
Yeah.
But Matthias, I have an issue with that type of approach by our opposition. It is not about personalities. It's not about Mr. Noah and Ms. van der Merwe. It's about challenging. For me, it's not even about challenging the reappointment. What we must be challenging are the structural issues around the whole positions of the Director General and the Deputy, to say, as the opposition, let's challenge the act, the very act, because the President is saying the President did not set up the act. Yeah, he's acting within the full parameters of law when he's doing what he's doing. Yeah, but the opposition ought to say, look, let's challenge the construction of this act that allows the President actually to just handpick whoever he wants, and bring this to Parliament for us to stamp the whole appointment, essentially. Because remember, Matthias, we don't have a crisis now. You may say we don't have a crisis now. It's Paulus Noah. He has a patchy record. He has won some cases, a few cases, lost a lot of them, or whatever. But there will come a time in the future, if the law remains how it is today, that when President Hage Geingob is no longer the President, when Paulus Noah is no longer the Director General, there will be other unscrupulous elements who are serving as President at that time, so corrupt, and they will appoint a crony of theirs in that position to cover up for their corruption. Yeah. So let's not look at it only in the context of the current climate. Things will change with time. The leaders that we have today will go. You will get a very corrupt leader one day in the future. We are not guaranteed that they will all be good leaders, who will really appoint very controversial characters. Just handpick them and put them as Director General. Maybe the Director General himself will be a very corrupt person at that time, and they loot together. But the law is structured in such a way that there's nothing that we can do about it. So the challenge is to change that law while time is still on our side.
Yeah. Okay. Favor, thank you very much. Thank you very much, viewers. And now onto our daily Olympic segments, where our boxer Jonas Juniors is training very hard for his upcoming bout at the Olympics. We wish him well. He's going to face Australia's Harry Garside. Let's have a look at his preparations and have a good night.
We were born for this moment. For every rise, every fall, to make the impossible possible. To create moments that inspire and live the thrill of excellence.
On the grandest stage of all.
Forget the past, for the future awaits. This is that moment we've all been waiting for pride, for country, for you.
Brilliant performance that was.
The Olympic Games Tokyo 2020. It's go time on GoTV. Love it.